So let's start our conversation, Ethan, and give our fans and our viewers the hard-hitting analysis that they want, that they crave. Sunday night on our show, toward the end of the broadcast, Jeff Rodriguez, Bob Skinner, or Springer, the devoted listeners who really are bringing a lot of intelligent conversation to the chat. They said, okay, we need to solidify these defensive rotations. We need to stick with a formula, establish a hierarchy, ones and twos. Let's identify the dogs. Let's identify the leaders of the pack, establish that, get people established in their roles. Very logical, solid line of analysis. There is simply a complication. I'm not disagreeing with Jeff and Bob. I'm just providing this devil's advocate case, and I want your take on it, Ethan. Because there were injuries at the start of the season, several defensive players didn't play in game one against Missouri State. A few came back, but a few still didn't get in to the second game against Georgia Southern. Like, that complication could certainly create the thought process among the coaching staff, among Danton Lynn, Coach Henney, woof woof, Rob Ryan, and Doug Belk. We would want, in an ideal world, to solidify our rotations at the start of Big Ten play, especially for a road game. But maybe these injuries just don't allow us that luxury just yet. Maybe we do have to still kind of explore a little, tinker a little, instead of having that fixed formula. I agree with the concept of it's Big Ten play. You need to start solidifying what you're doing. You need to have that hierarchy clear to everyone in the locker room and make it clear who's earned that number one role and who's the number two in the backup. I fundamentally do agree with that. But are the injuries preventing that from happening? Do you think that the staff still has to adjust and tinker with the rotations at Purdue?
I do think the injuries are contributing to that a little bit. I was watching Trojans live yesterday, and Lincoln Riley was talking about some of the defensive back play, and he brought up Chasen Johnson in particular, the UCF transfer. And he said he thought that Chasen played a great game, but he didn't get to play very much just because he was kind of on a pitch count. He was one of the players coming back from injury that we mentioned. So that's, something to continue to monitor, I suppose, if Chasen Johnson is still on a pitch count this week, or if, he's able to kind of get off that pitch count. I assume he'd play a little bit more, but he could still be limited. And then in terms of other injury updates, it feels like the offense is getting healthier, and the offense was already pretty healthy. But I saw that, Brian Jackson and Caden Chittenden came out in practice today, but didn't really see any updates on Alex Graham or any of the other defensive guys who have been held out. So I think that could be the case. I think that, we're still looking at some injuries that are affecting USC heading into Purdue. So will there be some tinkering? There could be. I do think, though, the staff at this point needs to have some idea in their mind as to if this game is closer than everyone is expecting it to be. So, if Purdue gives USC a run for their money, they need to have some guys that they can kind of trust and be the go-to guys when it comes down to it. If we're getting into the middle of the fourth quarter and this is a one-score game, we can't play around on defense anymore. We need to have some go-to guys. And whether that means, we talked a little bit last week about Kamari Ramsey playing out of position, whether that means moving him back, figuring out, one guy that we're just going to bet on at the nickel spot. And I don't even know if necessarily it has to be because the staff has seen a clear, guy who separated themselves, which, I would hope that there is. But even if there isn't, I think that they just need to instill confidence in somebody, because, you need to have that. You need to have at least somebody playing confidently in that spot. Like I said, if it comes down to it, if this game is closer than everybody thought that it was going to be. So I would certainly hope that they're at least making that contingency plan of, a unit of guys that they're going to roll out there if, push comes to shove and they need to go win the football game on the defensive side of the ball.
So let's get into the matchup between USC's defense and Purdue's offense, because I think that's where this game starts. I think that USC's offense should be able to, I think USC's offense is going to score a certain amount of points. I think, USC's floor on offense in this game, 24 points. Like, I think USC could play a below average, mediocre game and still score 24 points. That's my floor for the offense. It really comes down to the defense. And as we explained on our Sunday show here at the Voice of College Football, Ethan, USC scoring 59 against Georgia Southern as opposed to the 73 it did against Missouri State was a product of the defense not getting off the field. Georgia Southern was able to control the ball, 26 first downs. If USC's defense had gotten off the field more, you would have seen USC get into the 60s and very possibly the 70s. So the defense has to set the table for this turbocharged offense. If the defense can get off the field, it should all come together. It should all fall into place for this team. But of course, Georgia Southern gets 26 first downs against USC. What's Purdue going to do? Purdue, I would say, is a better team than Georgia Southern. I mean, Georgia Southern lost to Fresno State by 28, and Fresno State was nip and tuck with Oregon State. Easily could have missed. Fresno State needed to make a 41-yard field goal in the final minute to escape Oregon State. So I don't think Georgia Southern's pretty good. I think Purdue is better than Georgia Southern. But now, how much better? Obvious question. But anyway, it starts with the defense. So, Ethan, when we size up the matchup between the USC defense and the Purdue offense and like setting the tone for this game and how it's played, where does it start within the USC defense? Do we focus on the defensive line, just planting its flag and kind of taking the burden off the secondary, or does it start with the secondary? Like, maybe USC is going to allow a bunch of first downs to Purdue. Maybe Purdue's going to move the ball between the 20s, but it's up to the secondary to shut off the faucet of big plays down the field. And so even if Purdue gets a decent amount of time of possession, just shut off the big plays on that back line of defense. Purdue scores 19, 22, and that it's going to be enough for USC to win. So does it start with the D-line? Does it start with the secondary? Where do you come down on that?
It's an interesting question. I feel like Purdue's offense has been pretty inconsistent so far. Ryan Brown had a really good game in week 1 against Ball State, and then this past week it was kind of the opposite. He struggled a little bit against a lesser team in Southern Illinois, but the Purdue run game really took off, after having kind of a mediocre week against Ball State in week 1. So it's kind of hard to know what this Purdue offense truly is. I think the only thing that you can say that they are is inconsistent, which goes to show that it really is kind of a momentum game, and a way that USC really could build a lot of momentum, really get into Purdue's heads, is by getting into the backfield and utilizing the really talented defensive line that we've seen in the first few weeks. I could see them dialing up a couple of blitzes early, or trying to input some more aggressive play calling so that we can get into the Purdue backfield and also into their heads conversely. But I don't know. I mean, I think this is a more athletic defense and a more talented defense than Ryan Brown has faced this season, but obviously it's not a defense that has been entirely put together, because they've had their share of struggles with miscommunication and just not knowing where to be and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that that's going to be pointed out to him on the film to try to get him confident. And I just think, I do want to see the defensive line step up and just get into Ryan Brown's head, because I think if you can get in Ryan Brown's head and then you can stop the run even a little bit on top of that, then it'll be a very successful game for the USC defense.
Okay, a couple of follow-ups. Here's one. Do you just rely on your base front four to get that pressure, or do you think it's necessary to send some blitzes early and really send a message?
I think that it really depends on how the first couple of plays of the game go on the defensive side of the ball. Like, I'm not advocating for sending a blitz on 1st and 10, the first time Purdue touches the ball per se. Maybe I could see, Purdue does a couple of short runs and it's like 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2 and sending a blitz on 3rd and 2 to try to get a 3 and out, I think that would be a well-worthy strategy for the USC defense for sure in terms of trying to send a message early. If and kind of it's almost the same line of thinking. If Purdue gets a couple of big first downs on pass plays early, it's like, okay, we need to slow the roll a little bit for the quarterback and try to get him out of rhythm. I think, but so yeah, I think a couple of plays in, I would be hoping to see some blitzes. Again, it really depends on how the first 2 plays of the game go, but that's what I would think is like, 3rd play of the game, not the first play of the game, nothing too crazy, but just don't let Purdue get in any kind of rhythm, I think would be my strategy if I was trying to aid them in their defensive play calling.
So here's my next follow-up. So, if Purdue is driving the ball, let's say 50 to 60 yards but is settling for 38, 40-yard field goals in the first half of the game using like 4 to 5 minutes of the clock, I'm getting the sense, don't let them get into a rhythm. I'm getting the sense, no, let's not let Purdue control the ball. Even if drives stall out and Purdue's just kicking a bunch of 3-pointers, let's try and get on top of this game. I'm sensing that that's where you're coming from.
I think so, yeah, because I think building confidence in this defense is important. I don't think that the Purdue offense is super talented, so I think that the Purdue offense could get in their own way and, cause some of those situations that you were describing where they have to kick a field goal because, a receiver makes a drop or, the quarterback makes a bad throw or the running back makes a bad read. Like, just they're not, this isn't top 10 matchup that we're talking about. Like, it's a team that went 1-11 last year and they're much improved. They've already topped their win total, but I don't have the sense that they're going to be more than a bowl competitor this year, even though they've had a solid first couple of games. So I just think if you're, it's about this game, but it's also about the future as well. Like, you want to build some confidence in this defense because a lot of the mistakes we talked about last week have been mental. So I think to help the defense settle in, like, even if, it's 21-9 because both teams have scored all 3 times, but USC scored touchdowns and Purdue scored field goals. Like, I think it's more about, like, you don't want the defense to settle into this identity of, okay, we're the damage control defense because our offense does really well, because when you play better offenses in the future, the damage control mindset's not going to work. So I think, yes, even if you're limiting Purdue to field goals, I don't think you should be content with that for sure.
Okay, any specific player that you're really, really focused on for the USC defense in this game as, either being an X factor or like just someone who really needs to elevate to kind of lift the entire defensive unit, or someone who just in terms of the matchup in this game, could play a unique role? Any of those directions you want to go in, Ethan? Just a defensive player you want to highlight and circle for our audience here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's a lot of position groups. Like, I want to see the interior defensive line do better at run defense, and then I want to see the secondary, just somebody step up opposite DeCarlos Nicholson at the second cornerback spot. So I'll call out Chasen Johnson just because Lincoln Riley did say he thought he played a good game and that, the one pass interference penalty on him was uncalled for, which I do agree with. I think that, Chasen Johnson didn't really touch the receiver and he just fell over and a flag was thrown. So, if Chasen Johnson's not on a pitch clock, I want to see him, really come out and establish himself because he was a talented guy coming out of high school and, that spot is really wide open. So I'd want to see him really establish himself. And then, like those interior D linemen, Jahid Abasiri, have loved seeing him get after the passer, but we can't, let these interior runs just gash our defense all day long. So I'll call out Jahid Abasiri just because I've liked his pass defense, but not his, not really the interior D line's run defense. So if he can become a monster on both the pass and the run, then that'll be really big for USC.